welcome to the Hugs Not Drugs podcast. I'm John Barleycorn, and welcome. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do Carol Cruz's interview with me as her co-host on Cruzin on the Edge. So it's a two-parter, folks. So we're just going to listen to about 30 minutes of it, and then we'll do the next 30 minutes on the next show. So I hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, here's Dr. Uggs giving his rendition of a commercial. Yeah. We're gonna do a commercial real quick, and we're gonna let Carol Cruz guide us through her Cruzin on the Edge podcast. It's a good one, folks. All right, but who sponsors this is John Forlenza-Bailey. He wrote the Road to Wellness Workbook, which is a workbook designed to provide education, emotional support, and inspiration to persons suffering from addiction. It offers step-by-step lessons to people striving to turn their lives around regarding abstinence, relapse prevention, family dynamics, and self-assessment to continue to discover self day by day. Recovery's up to you. Mentors help. Journals help. You must exchange and surrender destructive behaviors for constructive ways of handling day-to-day stressors or triggers of life. And if that wasn't enough, Barleycorn, he wrote The Transformation of Dr. Uggs. It's John Forlenza-Bailey, something, I'll tell you. The Transformation of Dr. Uggs is an original fairy tale, came out last year. You can get both of these books, by the way, on Amazon. The Transformation of Dr. Uggs is my life story, basically, but I transform into Hugs Not Drugs. The Transformation of Dr. Uggs is an original fairy tale that explains the progression of the disease of chemical dependency. It's not intended to be a story about blaming others for the acquisition of an illness. This fairy tale is intended to explain, not to blame. It is a story of discovery, insight, acceptance, and finally, the right choices to live drug-free if one is chemically dependent. All right, that's cool. Here we go. Go for it, Carol Cruz.
Just a footnote in how we met. We haven't met yet in person. One day we will, but we both reside in Connecticut right now. John is in Florida in his summer space, in the warmer spaces, but he's just disclosed to me it's not as warm as he would like it to be. But we met on my seven-figure podcast. And John had indicated that he was in recovery and he was also in the clinical field. And I said, I have to have him on my podcast. And that's what we do on my seven-figure podcast. We share information, we share time, and we get to learn about each other, and we grow on this platform. So again, welcome, John. Welcome.
Thank you, Carol. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. So I'm going to get right to it as we go I'm going to ask some questions, but I'd love for us to just have a, sit back, relax conversation. Mm-hmm. Those that are viewing this podcast, please do the same. Get hydrated. Make sure you're hydrated. And just relax. And maybe there's something in what John and I are sharing about will resonate. And again, we're going to talk a lot about probably substance use, but also mental health disorder or mental health challenges and just life in general, and how are you doing? I remember the first time someone asked me that, or that was put out as a recovery coach, how can I help you, or how are you doing today? I might have been the first person that asked them that question. Because of life at them. So John, my first question, and again, we can go in all different directions. We have a whole hour, so please feel free to share whatever you'd like to share. But my first question is, when you hear about emotional wellness, what does that actually mean to you?
Well, that's a very good question. Emotional wellness to me means my intellect is over my emotion. When my emotion is over my intellect, that's squirrel time for me. I'm not focused. I'm leading with my heart instead of my head. I think we have to have both, but emotional wellness is when uh, I'm thinking over my heart. I need both, but I need that kind of asymmetry going on.
I love that response. John, you just brought me back to what my mom, as a woman in long term recovery, used to always say, Carol, it's the E over the I or the I over the E. And a lot of times we don't recognize because we're so engulfed in the emotion, right? And it's hard for us to kind of sift through or filter through, to find out what solutions we can come. But if I'm using my intellect, I'm able to break things down, and sometimes I need that help from a coach, from a clinician, from a group, and we both come from mutual aid groups as part of our recovery, right? And so
Right.
I love that, looking at the I over the E.
Yeah, I went to a meeting down here at 6:30 in the morning. I do that most every day, at
Mm-hmm.
least 5 days a week. And then on the weekend, I go to Delray Beach, and they have a self-help meeting there when the sun comes up. So I get to see the sunrise on the beach. So it's really rough down here in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the summertime, I'm on the shoreline. I know you're up there in the northern parts of Connecticut. And on the shoreline, we have a sunrise group. When I lived out on Long Island, I've always lived near the water for some reason. It's just part of my DNA, right?
Very happy.
And going to those sunrise groups, it is like the starting point of my day. Right now, as it's cold, and it's warmer inside, I still do. I have a routine. I do my journaling. I do my meditation or prayer time, and to start my day, and that's part of my wellness routine or regiment.
And we're
What are some other parts of your how you go into wellness?
That's very similar to what I do. I wake
Mhm.
up in the morning, and I usually get up early, between, today I got up at 4, but I usually get up at 5. Yeah, but I was pretty excited about here. I was pretty excited about doing a podcast I did yesterday, and got Sam the Man is a 40-minute podcast that I did with an interview of one of my friends. So that's out there, the Hugs Not Drugs podcast. That's going to be running for a week, and I have 22 already done already
Love that.
that are out there. But that's my routine. I wake up in the morning. I wake up early, gives me some quiet time, and then I read 5 meditation books. This is when I'm on my good foot. Now, I wouldn't say that I'm doing this every day. I mean, I try to do it every day, and I would love to say that, but it's an honest program here. So, but I did that today. I did 5 meditations, and there's a men's meditation. There's a 12-step book, and I belong to 2 fellowships, one called Chemical Dependence Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. And they've done me well for the last 46 years. I also do journal writing, even if it's a few sentences. It's always very helpful to put down on paper what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. So if I can identify what's going on, and then do something healthy about it. Uh, Positive or negative situations don't really matter. It's me being honest about putting it on paper, and then doing something proactive about it.
I love that, John, because again, it's so impactful. And we each have, we may walk in different pathways. Again, I walked in the pathway in the beginning where that was probably treatment and 12-step programs were probably the only, pathways that were around when I came into recovery, and as well as you. I know, and I would love to hear more about your journey into those 40 plus years in the work that you do, but also in your personal recovery. But you know, um, that was always instilled in us. in outpatient or inpatient treatment is, find a routine, find a group, whether it is a 12-step group, but find people that you can walk with in recovery. That's why sponsorship is super important to many of us. I don't do sponsorship, nor, I don't sponsor people or are sponsored, but I do have good friendships still with old sponsors. And it helped me in my growth, having that, not the sense of dependence like I did on drugs and alcohol, but it had that sense of security of having this person that I could walk alongside of and walk alongside of me and uplift me, and I could also uplift them. That's why, 12-step Dr. Bob and Bill W., that's why it worked for all these years, is that two people, they said two people make a meeting, right? But two people that walked alongside each other, being non-judgmental, really calling people forward versus calling you out, helping you, identify those triggers or identify those things that could create relapse or reoccurrence. So when you're working with people, or actually, let's take a quick step back into a little bit of your journey on, how you got here. How did you get here, John?
Well, I wrote a book that's a fairy tale about it. It's called "The Transformation of Dr. Drugs." It's about 22 pages. It has pictures and everything. But I started drinking very early at 7 years old. Now, it was not problematic. It was only during church and communion time. But however, it was important to me because I became president of the altar boys by age 9. So, but I didn't have problems until I was 19. And I was one of 4 children, all girls except for me, and I was treated special, the royal one, the male. And so, I've tried to make amends to my sisters. They're still not really hip to all this because I've been in recovery a lot longer than they, if they are in recovery. But uh, it's just really, and they're pretty, and we've got a good relationship, but we don't talk that much. It's still that Claudia Black theory of don't trust, don't talk, don't feel, don't ask questions, don't think. We had that in spades growing up because of the alcoholism in our family history. My father, I think, may have been a functional alcoholic, but my mother's father certainly was alcoholic, and she felt like an outcast. My sister, I did have a nice conversation with them around Thanksgiving time when I visited all of them in Maryland, and and she pointed out how my mother felt so different than everyone else and so shame based. And that's who was my primary caretaker, my mother. My father was always out trying to make a living for 4 kids and putting us through uh, Catholic school and stuff like that. So, and he was a Southern Baptist, by the way.
Okay.
But he loved my mother. I mean, they had a great relationship for 50 years. Whatever, however funny that is with relationships. So I started drinking very alcoholically when I was a junior in college, and the results were horrible. Immediately, lots of drugs involved, and I won't go into all the war stories, but in 10 years of drinking and drugging, I went to 10 mental institutions in 10 years and locked up in those inpatient 70s mental institutions because it was different in the 80s. There was more outpatient and we were kind of released, but there were still men in white coats when I was drinking and drugging, and I had plenty of men in white coats come and take me away. they're coming to take me away. And
I'm
so,
sorry.
no, no, it's good. That's what
I'm
we're
keeping
trying to,
up. Yeah.
so,
We're showing our age, John.
right. Yeah.
And you
We
look
remember
good for yours too.
you remember that song. Yes. Yes, ma'am. You look great. So I got sober in 1979, and just because I did, uh, uh, lights were on, but nobody was home, and it took a long time to gather my thoughts and get more cognitively prepared for life. I lived with my family, my parents, for a long time in recovery, about 3 or 4 years. So that was my sober house. My and, when I lived with them, and then rehabs got hot, and in the 80s, and by 1983 I was working in rehabs as an aide, and then I worked my way up, and then 5 years into that life vocation, a lot of my peers were had experience. We didn't have theory,
Right.
and they were encouraging us to basically go back to school, and I did, and and I got certified as an alcohol and drug counselor and things. A lot of my peers didn't do that, so the old timers in the recovering people became less, and it kind of thinned out the herd. And
Yeah.
by the 90s, I was a program coordinator of programs, outpatient programs got were new then, and so I did that. Then I formed a private practice. I got married when I was in 1987, when I was 37 years old, and we were still married 38 years. We've raised 2 children, and I've always gone to meetings. But I'm a two-hatter for sure, because people see that I have some clinical experience. I always tell people I'm a therapist, but I'm not a very good one. And,
Why do you say that, John?
well, I don't want to be counseling my peers in
Sure.
recovery. Yeah, so if anybody, uh, you know, utilizes my services in private practice, they've heard about it through Psychology Today or something
Okay.
like that. I don't want to. Sometimes they're begging me to do it, and I end up doing it, and I don't think it ends very well. But I try to stabilize people and encourage them to just don't drink, go to meetings, pray, and change your whole way of life, would you?
Right. Yeah, that's a book. That's the book in a nutshell, right? But it's the book that worked for you. And, something you all, thank you so much for sharing that. But there was also things that you shared in regards to, I also got married at 37. And I am still legally married, but he's my best friend, but we are not together in that way. And he's also a person in long-term recovery. But thinking of some of the things that you said on, what programs were available, or like inpatient men in white coats, or, doctors and people in white coats. They used to, I think about, when Billie Holiday was institutionalized, and the inhumane process, the electric shock therapy. It was, like they were going to, or if you got into a religious program, and there's still religious programs that are going to pray the way out of, to make you sober, or clean, and using those terms, that it's evil, that it's a sin, that don't recognize it as a disease. Um, and we see that process, and it's still not as apparent today. When I first went into treatment in the 80s and 89, that was actually, I went into 84, and that was the first rehab residential program in Sterling, New Jersey. It was after I had gotten arrested, and everybody was telling my mother she had, multiple years in recovery, and they were telling her, get her in rehab. She'll get lesser time. Because I was looking at 14 years in prison for distribution of narcotics. And I went into this treatment, and again, I was bunked. It was a co-ed, but I was on the women's side, and I tried to integrate myself into making friends, but I did, there was still this lost little girl, Carol, that that really camouflaged herself, just wanted to hide. Drugs brought me out into a world that I definitely was not prepared for, and alcohol. But that's what I thought I deserved. So we've seen the evolving points of how treatment works, right? But treatment's not for everyone. I think I've shared this with someone else on this podcast. Treatment is not for everyone. It's not cookie cutter. It's not 9 to 5. You hear those terms. So when you're meeting someone where they're at, you talked about not wanting to counsel your peers. And I feel the same way as a recovery coach. I've had people ask me, Carol, I need you to be my recovery coach. I can't in that way, because one, we've already crossed the line, and now you're asking me to be something else. And I can't authentically wear that hat and keep the friendship at the same time. Yeah. I can't place that objective. So, when you're meeting someone where they're at in the work that you do as a clinician, what does that look like?
Well, I have standards. I think my boundaries as a two-hatter, as a clinician and as a recovering person, that, the boundaries get blurred. So I have a bias around people that want to work with me, and say I really don't want like with my recovery workbook, the Road to Wellness workbook that I have. I've done that with many people in different forms before it was published and stuff, where they do a journal every day and they have exercises to do. I don't normally, I encourage them, the best option for you is to go to meetings and do this book, not just do this book. And I've worked with people that have just done the book, and they don't fare, almost to a person, they don't fare as well as somebody that takes the recommendations of going to meetings. And so if I have my druthers, and now I can because I'm basically retired. I had a client today at 9 o'clock, but I have like maybe two clients, maybe 4 sessions or something in a month's time. I'm really not there. I'd rather just do my podcast and go to meetings, and that's where I'm at, and maybe do some occasional speaking as a professional speaker, but and get paid for it. But
yes.
And I'll do.
Oh yes, yeah. You gotta get paid.
But then, well, there are things like that out there, and I would like to do that, so I'm pursuing that. But the payment at a detox is, they're showing me what's going to happen if I do pick up a drink. So in a lot of ways, they're helping me more than I can help them. So
that reminder.
yeah, and so but I usually have a bias. I'd much rather not work with somebody that's not willing to take that recommendation. And I would tell them I'll give them other referrals and things like that. This person is much more going to be well suited to help you than me. So doing that, when I'm true to myself, I'm going to be a lot truer and helpful to other people. It's like,
No,
how can you love somebody if you don't love yourself? And it's
this is true.
uh,
Can't keep it like unless you give it away in a sense.
Carol,
But you have to love yourself to be able to get to that point. And we see that a lot. Even I'm going to use some terms that we hear about 12-step programs, right? And how when I walked into that first meeting, and I didn't walk into it alone. I walked in with my mother, and then later on, after several reoccurrences, I started walking into the rooms by myself. I think a lot is that building rapport and trust. And we hear all these smiling people. They're laughing, they're joking, they're smiling, and I'm like, "What the hell are you laughing? What do you got to laugh about?" And it's eating up, from the inside out, because I want what you have, but I'm not sure if I'm able to do the work. And I love the process that you said, what are the tools that you do provide, if you're not going to take them on as a client, you do say, hey, you can utilize this workbook, but I don't use this as your only pathway, utilize meetings, therapy. And we've also seen that when we integrate, or we at least make those suggestions to people, it's not it's not just a one way, it's my way or the highway kind of thing. No, it used to be. And some of the messaging in the 12-step rooms would be like that. I used to say, and again, anybody listening that is part of 12-step, I'm not bashing 12-step. It saved my life. But there are people in there that do have not the best motives for or intentions for people that are coming into the room, and their ego. They may have multiple years of recovery, but their ego is keeping that person that's become dependent on you, or at least wanting to trust you to guide them, because that's all we are. Whether we're a sponsor, and we're a member of that program, we're there as guides. We're not doctors, not lawyers, definitely not clinicians. We're peers, but we're not paid peers. I'm not going to ask somebody, for to pay me for my time when I'm going over the 12 steps with them. So we do get that mixed message. And I've seen a lot of damage to men and women. I've seen a lot of damage, and I've had this conversation with people offline that these programs are great, but they're not the end all to be all.
Right.
And that finding what works best for you. And that's what I love about my work in recovery coaching, although I don't do it as much as I used to, because I work on a different platform now, is really integrating, what do you want to do? What does that look like for you? Asking you those open-ended questions, the what, the how, and how can I help you get there?
That was part one of the Hugs Not Drugs with Cruzin on the Edge. And as you can tell, two knowledgeable people. Any last words, Hugs Not Drugs? Yeah, I really enjoyed that education and inspiration. Both of them have great stories. And I like the way that John makes the attempt to stab at humor all the time. Cracks me up. We'll get to the part 2 of Cruising on the Edge next week. So stay tuned for that, and enjoy yourselves, everybody. Harry, take us out with Sketchbook, and don't forget to love yourself so you can do Hugs Not Drugs. Bye, everybody.